In the heart of Europe lies something that shouldn't exist. A forest that has never been cut down or managed by human hands. And while 99% of Europe's original forests have vanished, this one survived wars, empires, and centuries of development. But how? And more importantly, what secrets has it been hiding? This is the story of Europe's last wilderness, a living window into what the entire continent looked like 10,000 years ago. Here you'll discover a massive creature that dominated this forest for thousands of years, until it was declared extinct in the wild. Or so it seemed. Against all odds, the species returned to its original home, something that seemed impossible. But where exactly is this place? And why have you probably never heard about it? Europe's last original virgin forest sits on the border between Poland and Belarus, in a sparsely populated region. So in order to understand how it survived when almost everything else on the continent disappeared, we need to go back to a time when Europe looked completely different. In recent history, Europe's nature was transformed more intensely than on any other continent. The Industrial Revolution consumed most of the European forests for fuel and timber in only a few decades, except for one small pocket that somehow escaped. But what makes this story even more remarkable is where this place is located and how it became part of Europe's most disputed frontiers, in a conflict of two worlds in ways that would have seemed impossible only a short time ago. So let's understand how all of this happened. Białowieża became a royal hunting reserve in the 14th century, receiving protection under the Polish monarchy, the Dukes of Lithuania, and several dynasties of Russian Tsars. For 600 years this forest was protected not only for conservation, and what started as a hunting ground accidentally became Europe's most important ecological treasure. But the area was about to face its greatest test. Two world wars brought devastation into the region and saw exploitation, tension, and development pressure. Each regime that controlled this forest had different plans for it, and most involved cutting it down. But against all odds, the forest survived because of constantly changing politics that prevented any single destructive plan from being fully implemented. But what makes this place truly special is what lives inside of it. So after researching Białowieża for a while, I decided I had to see this forest for myself. As a creative, I tend to get drawn to places that tell stories most people don't really hear about. So I booked a flight to Poland, packed my camera, prepared for an awesome experience. The flight took me to Warsaw, and I spent the night in the capital, a city that itself has been once rebuilt from destruction. The next morning I grabbed a rental car and headed towards the Polish-Belarusian border. I noticed the forest gradually became a lot denser and older, and after a few hours I finally arrived and was ready to document what remains of Europe's last wilderness. There's one particular story of survival that defines this forest, and one that almost ended in complete failure. The European bison was the king of Europe's forest for thousands of years. These massive animals appear in cave paintings dating back almost 20,000 years. And they once roamed the entire continent in massive herds. But by the early 1900s, hunting and habitat loss had pushed them to the brink of extinction. World War I delivered the final blow, and the last wild European bison was believed to be shot in 1919. The species that had survived ice ages and centuries of human expansion was gone from the wild forever. Or so it seemed. In 1929, scientists began a pretty ambitious experiment. Using the only 12 remaining bison from zoos and private collections, basically the only survivors of the species, they started a breeding program. Today, over 800 European bison roam freely through the forest, and what started as a last-ditch effort became a massive success story. If you're lucky, you can watch these animals move through the forest again, which is really amazing. But there's something unusual about how this forest actually works and that most people completely misunderstand. And it's the reason why attempts to improve it almost always backfired. And we'll get to that in just a moment, but first I want to give you a behind the scenes look at how I created this video, something that will be particularly useful if you create content for social media. When I went to Poland, I was really happy with the footage I captured, but creating a video like this requires so much more than what you shoot in the field. And that is where Motion Array became essential for this project. They not only sponsored the video, but also made the trip possible, gave me also access to their library of editing assets that contributed to this video. So let me show you exactly how this works in practice. First, I wanted to create a cool atmosphere that matches the shots from the forest. So I decided to use one of their color grading presets to define the video's color language basically. So I simply went to their platform, selected LUTs, and I found a pack that is called Cinematic, downloaded it, applied it to all of my clips, and boom, it suddenly becomes super atmospheric and ties everything together nicely, no matter the camera you shot it from. Whenever I had gaps to fill in the story, I needed some kind of animation, so I browsed their templates to make things look a lot more organic. So for instance, this slide projector template I found on Motion Array. I also used their AI voiceover generator so I could visualize the whole timeline and basically start editing before I even traveled to the location. And this saved me a ton of guesswork and streamlined my creative workflow. Finally, I needed authentic sounds to really sell the atmosphere, so I simply searched on their platform for forest sound effects and found exactly what I needed. What makes Motion Array really invaluable for me is their unlimited download model. For less than $25 a month, you get access to like 2 million assets without worrying about fees. For a project like this, that unlimited access really saved me time and money. So if you want to make professional quality video without a professional budget, I think Motion Array is a really good shot. The link in my description gives you 2 months for free when you sign up for the annual plan, which I highly recommend. And with that said, thank you so much Motion Array for making this happen. You guys are really amazing. Now let's talk about what in particular makes this place so resilient and the modern battles that are going on there. Now, if you think about it, this forest is essentially a living museum of prehistoric Europe. The complexity of the entire place is remarkable when compared to managed forests elsewhere. Most trees here are over 200 years old, with some reaching even 500 or more. But it's not only the trees. In Germany, where I'm from, I've literally never encountered a wild animal in the forest. Here, wildlife signs are everywhere if you know where to look, and if you're lucky enough, you can see all kinds of things. During my visit, I found fresh boar tracks pressed into the forest floor that showed that animals had passed through just hours before. And while the European bison restoration represents one of conservation's greatest success stories, they are not the only remarkable animals here. The forest hosts species that vanished from the rest of Europe centuries ago. Eurasian wolves still hunt in the woodlands, and you can find plenty of other predators that exist nowhere else on the continent. Now, what creates this amazing biodiversity is the fact that dead trees are not removed immediately for aesthetics like in managed forests. Here, instead, fallen logs become the foundation of the forest. They host fungi, insects, and moss that all depend on decomposition. Today the forest faces a new challenge. In 2016, the Polish government authorized large-scale logging operations, claiming it was necessary to combat a bark beetle outbreak that was killing the trees. Environmental groups and scientists were outraged, and they argued that removing the dead trees would destroy the ecosystem. Things escalated, and eventually the EU had to step in, taking Poland to the European Court of Justice for violating environmental protection laws. That sparked protests, international scientists published urgent appeals, and the court eventually ruled against Poland, ordering an immediate halt to all logging. The decision was crystal clear. Białowieża's value as Europe's last primeval forest outweighed any economic or forest management arguments. But the damage was already done, as thousands of trees had been removed. And at its core, the battle over this forest is about two different philosophies, how humans should relate to nature basically. One sees them as resources, the other thinks that some places are more valuable when left alone. It's crazy, the moss so thick, look at that, wow, beautiful. Today Białowieża faces a new threat that is way bigger than cutting down trees. Since 2021, the Polish-Belarusian border running through the forest has become a flashpoint in Europe's migration crisis. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine started, the forest has been affected by hybrid warfare. Belarus has weaponized refugees, pushing thousands of people, often flown in from the Middle East, toward the Polish border through the woodlands. Poland has responded by militarizing the area, deploying troops and constructing a steel barrier that cuts directly through the forest. Things escalated further, and Russia only recently invaded Polish airspace.
That Russian drones were shot down in Polish airspace overnight.
The drone that crashed is of Russian origin.
Violation. Europe's airspace by more than 10 Russian drones.
Repeatedly violated its airspace.
Prime Minister Donald Tusk said he has activated Article 4 of NATO's treaty.
Shooting down Russian planes and drones that violate NATO airspace.
Because of this continued aggression, there are now even serious discussions applying landmines to sections of the border and effectively the forest, a move that seems necessary but would devastate the habitat that has survived for centuries. The Belarusian border is right over there, maybe 500 meters. I just walked a little too far, so the soldier told me to return. Very scary. Hopefully they're not gonna mine this place in a couple of years from now. I noticed that the park was handing out these flyers warning visitors about the border wall and restricted areas, and during my filming I even saw a few military vehicles patrolling the roads, which honestly felt a bit surreal. At one point I almost accidentally walked toward the Belarusian border, not realizing how close I was to crossing into what has become one of Europe's most tense conflicts. I mean, it's pretty hard to imagine. The forest that outlasted 2 world wars and a ton of political issues now faces the possibility of becoming a militarized zone basically. But perhaps that's exactly why places like Białowieża matter more than ever. Visiting this place taught me a bunch of things I didn't expect. Old growth forests are, in my opinion, way more impressive, they're more resilient, more adaptable, and far more complex than their equivalents that dominate the rest of Europe, where trees are cut, planted, and basically never left alone. This place survived 600 years of human history by accident, so hopefully it can survive the next 600 on purpose. If you found this interesting, please check out my video about how the Amazon rainforest is actually man-made. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, guys. You are awesome. I'll see you in one of the next videos.